Joe, you're all so far away, and we were having such a lovely chat before, so I may shout. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's Owen Blackhurst. Welcome to this panel, More Women in Football. We're going to be talking about the growth of the game in Italy. In the UK and across Europe, the game has grown exponentially in the last few years. In the UK especially, where I live, we had the firework moment of the Euros, and that has seen the expansion of the WSL and more commercial revenue coming into the game, and clubs broadening as well as growing vertically. And now the landscape compared to where it was 10 years ago, it's impossible to believe we've got to where we have. And I think there's a lot Italy can take from the growth we've seen. But I will shut up now, and I'll pass you over to my panel. So if you can introduce yourselves from left to right, or right to left, whichever way you want to do it.
So I'm Brennan, and I lead INDIVISA, which is a women's football brand. So we are dedicated to covering the women's game from grassroots to elite, and we have a global channel, US coverage, an Arabic channel, and last week we launched an Italian channel. So that's super exciting, and we can't wait to grow the game here.
Yeah, I'm Zoe Johnson. I'm the Managing Director at Brighton and Hove Albion. My role as Managing Director at the club is to oversee the women's and girls programme. The women's first team currently competes in the Women's Super League.
I'm Faisal. I'm a Arab football culture marketing consultant, and I am the president of Banaat FC, which is the first women's football club in the UAE built on Arabic representation.
Fantastic, thank you. We're going to go straight in and talk about growth. Morgan, I'm going to start with you. You're a fan, you're a player, you work in the game, but I think we all know that clubs and the game needs to get fans when they're young, right? So what have you seen in your time as the biggest drivers for young fans to attach themselves to the game?
I mean, I think obviously, as you've touched on, the major tournaments really help, and really riding off the back of those. And, you know, in the UK specifically, we were very lucky that the Lionesses had their success at the 2022 Euros. And obviously that drove, you know, huge numbers in participation and attendances in the WSL off the back of that. But I think a huge part of that has also just been the players and their stories, and, you know, young girls and women finding connection with these players and finding these role models that they can kind of resonate with. And I think there's a lot of power in that, and that's been a huge driving force, is these female players getting their name out there and people finally starting to hear what amazing stories they have to tell.
Amazing. And Zoe, it's probably good to bring you in there. You work at Brighton and Hove, a very progressive club, great owner in Tony Bloom. But we did benefit from this firework moment, but what do you think has helped broaden the appeal? Because we've talked about we've talked a little bit backstage about on pitch, and the game's gone like that, but that's not enough, right? You have to grow laterally as well. So what type of things do you think Brighton have done, or what have you seen that have helped?
Yeah, I think it's just a genuine investment in the game and a belief of where the game can get. And I think, as Morgan just spoke there about the success of the Lionesses in the UK has been something that we've really been able to capitalise on. But that's not something that's a major tournament's not going to come around every year that you can use that to keep trying to grow your team. So there's things that you've got to do in club, and I think you've got to have an ownership group that believe in what you want to do and how progressive the game can be. You've got to have senior leaders within the club that also are going to work hard every day to keep sort of bringing down the barriers that are there in the game, and have a real genuine passion for the investment and see where the future can go. And I think that's what we have at Brighton, but it's not just something that's happened overnight. It's took a long time. It's been a long journey, and there's been a lot of people that have been involved for years building the foundations. And my job over the last couple of seasons has just been sort of building on those strong foundations that have been left to be able to sort of keep striving it and try and help. We've got a vision to be a top 4 WSL club, which we're quite public about. So I think it's been building off the back of the foundations and being able to drive that forwards and see if we can make that happen.
And that must feel a pretty exciting environment to work in every day.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think, you mentioned Tony Bloom. I think people always say, why Brighton? And I think when you've got an owner like Tony Bloom, it makes every day exciting. And when you see the passion that he has, he lives and breathes it. He's born and bred in Brighton. It makes it a lot easier to come to work.
Yeah, and Badria, we spoke again before about, I mean, the UAE is obviously a very different landscape to what we're talking about, but there's two things we talked about before. One, that the growth in Saudi was too quick, and secondly, that growth is slow across the region. So can you just give us, from your point of view, how things are in the UAE and what learnings probably Italy can take from that?
Well, for us, we started with the women's national team in the UAE in 2004 and really made a name for itself in 2005. So very quickly in the region became the point of envy for Arab women's football, and was the place that players from the likes of Jordan and Lebanon and Saudi would come to go pro. But unfortunately, soon after that, the attention kind of shifted away from the UAE. Not that it even went anywhere else. I think women's football in general, and I think around the world at that time, did not get the spotlight it deserved. But I think at the time, we talked about the importance of the people working in football and the role they have to play in maintaining the awareness needed for the game to keep growing. It is their responsibility. And while football is relatively young, or the whole country is very young when you talk about the UAE. So even when it comes to men's football, we're not as mature as other countries around, but we've done great things. And that's where I've worked most of my life. But the shift and seeing the difference in how football is managed from men's to women's, which is recent for me since I only started Banaat FC a year ago, I'm realizing what's been missing in the region and how it's been very slow for women all around, even though we know the talent is there. It's there in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Saudi, in the UAE, when it comes to the GCC at least and around us. But the likes of the money that's been put into Saudi, when we said it grew too quickly, I think football has always been there and it's always been great. Women's football, just like in the UAE, did not have the attention it deserved either. But we knew about all these clubs before they became Al-Hilal, Al-Shabab, Al-Ittihad. They were all private academies. And there was a women's league that people did not know about unless you were a fan of women's football. So it's been there. It just, people weren't interested. And they are now. And obviously when, again, you put in the kind of money that Saudis put into it, and it's not just money, there's a vision there. It's a decision that comes from upstairs, and the importance of getting that kind of decision and the impact that's had on the game has had a trickle-down effect on the rest of the countries around. And it's woken us up a little bit, because if we were the country everyone was looking up to and then everyone forgot that women's football existed in the UAE, that's what Banaat FC, the reason I created this club now is to reclaim that space for the UAE.
And with that, you've obviously partnered with Nike. And what does that partnership give you the opportunity to do?
Well, I think it set the stage across the Arab region. We are the only independent women's football club in the Arab world to become an official Nike club. That's huge in itself as a statement to make for a club that's only 1 year old. They launched our jersey reveal happened at their store in Dubai Mall. We had our own stage. It was crazy. Things we've never seen. I haven't seen. I used to work in the Pro League as marketing director there, and Al Ahli Club as well. And I haven't seen these brands do anything like what they just did for my club. It was a very important moment for women's football, and I think it shows everyone else the potential and the appeal if they work on it. I think one of the things I faced a lot is a lot of the clubs seem to think you have to be only about performance to be taken seriously as a club. And if you're about marketing, then you're no longer a serious club. So people like to hate on Banaat FC and say that we were just a social media club, or we just cared about our image. Well, there's a reason we're also the top 2 clubs, one of the top 2 clubs in the country, and that we were unbeaten we won 10 out of our first 11 games. And so the performance is there. But you have to match it also with the marketing, because the awareness is what we're after, so we can create more role models. And Nike helped us do that, for sure.
Yeah, I often think it's a sort of skewed view in that if people only followed men's teams because they were good, then no one would follow more than 3 teams. These are teams you attach yourselves to through family ties or because your friends do it, and whatever it may be. So I often think it's easy, for men especially, to say, it's not good enough, I don't want to watch it. But that's the easiest cop-out in the world, because you go and stand and watch non-league football every Saturday, and that's crap, right? We all know that. So I think it can't just change through the product being better. It has to be for brands helping as well. So in your experience at the club, have there been any brands who have gone above and beyond in their support and their investment, not just in financial terms, but in the way they care about the game growing?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think if the game's to grow, you've got to have like big brands that are attached to it, the right brands that are going to support the game. At Brighton, we have a really big one in American Express, who have been a partner of the whole club for a long period of time now, and they help sort of grow things on a daily basis. They're heavily involved in the club. We have them, they come down, they speak to the players, they speak to the staff, they see what the needs are, how they can help get more bums on seats when we have games, what they can do to sort of help support the athletes in their individual areas. And like, the club also is growing in other brands that want to come and be a part of that, and they want to come and be a part of solely the women's game and the success that it brings.
Yeah, and Morgan, you obviously run a grassroots team as well, and I think there's more of a connect in the UK now between the grassroots side of the game and the professional game, and probably in places where the game is developing, less of a connect. What do you think clubs here can do?
I mean, a lot. I think there's a lot of value in connecting with the women who are playing the game here in Italy as well, not just at a pro level, obviously. I'm talking about more of the community teams, the girls who are playing in school. How do we keep them playing? And then they become fans, and then that fuels the club and helps that growth. But I think there's a lot of value in brands partnering with these community teams. Like, we've seen a lot of that in the UK. A lot of brands are partnering with, five-a-side teams that only have 1,000 followers on Instagram, but it's more about the story that they have and what they can kind of bring to a campaign or bring to a partnership and what they represent. And I think that does exist in Italy. We've been doing a lot of research recently, and there are some really incredible teams that exist in Milan, Turin, Rome, etc., that are meeting on a Tuesday night and playing football together. And they're obviously fans of the game as well. And I think it's just making sure that there's access for them to find information about fixtures, making it easier to find out what stadium it's being played in, etc. There's just a lot of work to be done on that kind of access and finding that connection between grassroots, the girls and women who are playing, and turning them into fans of the club.
Cool. I want to move on from the grassroots side there into stadiums now. In the UK, I mentioned it slightly before, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, Arsenal were giving away tickets to fill the Emirates. And people thought that's always going to be the case. Oh, they can only fill it if they give away tickets. Nothing's ever going to change. That was the perceived view. But you come forward 10 years and Arsenal sell loads of tickets for the Emirates. And there on Thursday night, Juventus are playing at the Emirates. Whereas 2 weeks ago here, Arsenal played Juve at the Stadio Comunale, which is not where Juventus play. So Zoe, you've got... we talked about Tony Bloom before. Now, I believe that you've got a purpose-built stadium coming for the women's team. Is that right, or you're investigating it?
Yeah, that's the ambition. The ambition is to have... we currently play at Crawley Town, which is a League One football club, and it's 20 miles outside of the Brighton and Hove city, which obviously is hard when we're trying to attract fans, when we're trying to build a sort of local fan base. So yeah, we've got an ambition to build a purpose-built women's stadium in the city of Brighton and Hove, which will make it far more accessible for fans to be able to come, help us really grow our brand, help us actually sort of feel like we've got some sort of synergy with the city itself. So that's something that we're working on. We're hopeful in the next couple of years we'll have that stadium built, and it'll be sort of an actual home for our players to go to as well. I think we talk about brand and marketing and what can we do. We play in a stadium at Crawley that's red, and obviously Brighton are blue, so the amount of work that goes into that operationally on a game day to try and make that feel more like a Brighton and Hove stadium is a lot of work. So yeah, the sooner we can get our own stadium back in the city is something that's really important to the football club.
And there's plenty of other reasons, right, that I know it's a good thing if Arsenal are filling the Emirates, right? But there's other reasons for having a purpose-built stadium, right, beyond what you talk about identity, and that stadiums that are built now are set up for men, right? Male fans, male players. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our CEO and our owner, Tony Bloom, they're really passionate about having a stadium that's purpose-built for female athletes. It's built for them in terms of if you go into a changing room at half-time, obviously you've got sort of 18 to 20 players that need to come in there. You've got a 15-minute half-time team talk. If they all need to go to the toilet, having to queue when they've got, at the minute at Crawley, you've got urinals or you've just got one toilet cubicle. Obviously, it takes a lot of time for them to be able to go to the toilet. Things like the showers, making sure that there's actual shower cubicles and not open showers, obviously to make them feel a lot more comfortable. And I think it's even things like when you're on the concourse and you go into main stadiums now and you see there's a lot of pints of beers being sold. If you look at actually what's being sold, if you come to one of our fixtures at Crawley, there's not actually a lot of pints of beer get sold. So it's catering to the fan base and the audience that you've got there, but then also making it designated for the athletes to be able to perform to the best of their ability as well.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Andrea?
No, I mean, that's the dream. I don't know. I can't think of any club not wanting their own women's purpose-built facility, and that's, you know, I want that. You know, the office that Rebecca has in Ted Lasso? Like, that's the dream, right? We all want to be sitting up there and then watching your team on a pitch that just belongs to them, a place that they can call home. I understand the struggle of your team having to play far out of the city. I mean, we don't have our own facility at all, and we're grateful to Al Nasser Club in Dubai that they host us for our training sessions, but we were just told that the Federation will no longer be hosting our games for this first qualifier round of the league, and we don't know what to do or where to go. So that's a dream for down the line. Right now, we'll take anything that's natural grass and 11 aside, but hopefully, I think, especially looking at the UK, I mean, that's the inspiration. I mean, that's where we're all getting these dreams from. If we say one club is able to do that, and then others like Brighton following suit, hopefully very soon, it makes it feel, you know, realistic, like something that we can actually achieve in a few years. We're where they were maybe 20 years ago, but the way things are going now, things are speeding up a lot faster, so we could get there a lot sooner, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think even in the UK, it's so much better than it was. But if you look, there's been a situation at Manchester United this year where they came into the game quite late a few years ago, and it appeared quite cynically when money was coming into the game that they finally had a team despite the resource they have. There's been some renovations this year, and the women's team have been shifted into what are basically porter cabins, right? Which, with the resource they have, shouldn't happen. But Morgan, it's an interesting point here. Obviously, you grew up in Australia, and the Matildas are a very successful and very respected and very well-supported team. If you were looking the outside, in a place where you might expect that they may not be, I think that's probably fair if you think of Aussie cricket fans and stuff like that. Growing up watching that, how was that achieved? Does that come from organisations treating all athletes as equal? Does that come from tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're being kind there by referring to them as cricket fans. I guess Australia is quite a traditionally chauvinistic country. It's very sporty, very masculine. And I think there's a few contributing factors. I think one of them is obviously that soccer in Australia is not our number one sport. So men's soccer, it's not like the women's soccer was constantly being compared to that because the focus was on rugby or cricket, athletics, etc. And I think the Matildas were actually just given the space to flourish and to thrive without constantly being compared to the Socceroos, their less successful counterpart. And I think that's been a huge part of it. They've just been able to have their own identity and their own story. And off the back of that, you've had role models like Sam Kerr and a lot of Aussie players, go over to the States and in the WSL here in the UK and have great success. And then that's obviously had an amazing effect that's been happening, since the early 2000s, really, leading up to the 2023 World Cup. And then it was kind of just set up for success because everyone already knew them. They're the number one most popular sports team in Australia. And I think that's really just down to them being invested in and being treated for what they are from the start.
And what's the trickle down been for players, for younger players getting into the game off the back of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think soccer in Australia for girls is massive. I played growing up. It was always, quite accessible, and I think I've been very fortunate to grow up in a very a society that really values girls playing sport, and I think that was fairly easy in school. But I think now it's just they've invested so much more into it. There's, specific facilities, especially for the Matildas. They've put a lot of money into the A-League as well, and the kind of domestic league there, trying to retain talent as well and make sure that stays within the country. But yeah, I think it's just investment they've put a lot of money into it, and it's really paid off.
Yeah, I think it's a further demonstration that there's so many building blocks to grow in the game. It can't just be money. You talked about Sam Kerr there, obviously a player with a very strong brand, very strong identity, great personality on the pitch, great personality off it. And young fans need heroes to idolise at all levels. And certainly here, where we're probably still in a if you can't see it, you can't be it stage with the game. But this puts pressure. Does it put pressure on players to be brands themselves? Morgan, I'll start with you. And how can clubs help? I mean, it's a tricky thing because some people in this room will love having a social media profile. Some people on this stage will. Some people won't, right? And so everyone can't do it. So I suppose, how important is it that players do it? But more importantly, how important is it that clubs help them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is important, especially in the women's game when clubs are trying to not only grow their fan base, but connect on a richer level with the fans that they already do have. And I think the club can offer a lot of support on that front. It's learning more about the players as people off the pitch. What were they doing before they went professional, potentially? What were they doing on the side when they were semi-professional? And what do they value as a person, and what are their kind of barriers that they've overcome to get to where they are? Because a lot of these, women have incredible stories as to how they've made it to where they are. And I think the clubs have a great role in sharing those stories and partnering with media brands and other brands to elevate those stories. And that's how you find fans that then connect to these players, like you say, Owen. And, they don't all have to have kind of mass appeal. Not every player is as, I guess, commercially valuable as others, but they all have incredible stories to tell. And I think the clubs are kind of the starting point for that.
Yeah, but Drea, this is something that with Banaat, you lean on social heavily. And we spoke before about that you may not know what's going on in domestic leagues across Europe, but you certainly know the teams who are doing good stuff because you'll see it on social. So how do you talk to me and describe a bit what you do with your players and how you advise them?
One of the things we did when we first started this club that became pretty known across the country with female footballers is that all our players must have public social media accounts. And that got a lot of attention, a lot of heat, because culturally we have a lot of restrictions when it comes to women's football, like in many countries. But like I said, we had women's football since 2005, but nobody knows about it. I worked in professional men's football, and I didn't even know what was going on with the women's sport. So I thought it was absolutely essential that everyone has a public account. And I even stated in their contracts, now they're not real contracts, the players don't get paid, we're not in a professional league, but I wanted them to experience what it's like to actually sign a contract as a player. And these are things you're responsible for because it is for your best interest to actually deliver on all these different items on there. And one of them being public social media account. The second one is you must post a minimum of twice a week across Instagram and TikTok, and we create content. So we take photos and videos, and we're giving you this content, and we do social media workshops. And because this is what I've done with male athletes through my consultancy, I know how to make a player a bit into a star in their own community, at least. So it doesn't have to be like the most famous player, but to get them the attention they need to help them in their sport on and off the pitch. And I wanted to offer that to the girls. Now, what I thought is because this is what I got paid to do by the guys, that the girls will understand how lucky they are to have this, to have someone oversee this and offer it to them for free and take care of them and help them become little stars in their own rights. But what I didn't understand is they had no interest in it. They didn't understand it because they'd never had a role model in the sport to look up to. They've never seen someone actually make it to see what the dream actually looks like. So for them, it just felt like a burden. It felt like just something so foreign to them. And of course, there were families that were against it. There were players we could not take on because of it. But we are here as Banaat FC to change the game for everyone else. So that was mandatory for us.
Yeah, and you said something there. Social media can be, for some people, and for all of us at times, probably quite anxiety-inducing. And Zoe, how do you deal with that from a club perspective? Because obviously the players have all got accounts, or most of them have, and it benefits everyone if they do. But then social media can be quite a toxic place. Do they go through training at Brighton, or is there a welfare officer who helps them deal with it? If you could just give us a bit of background there.
Yeah, I think as the game's grown, it's become quite a significant problem in the game. I think with online abuse and things like that with the accounts, I think the more the players become higher profile and you put them in the spotlight, you've got to make sure that you also safeguard them as well. So yeah, at Brighton we actually hire a company that looks after and all of the social media accounts, doesn't post things for them, but it helps us monitor what they're putting on there. So we put things like if they put their location on, then we'll get a notification that one of our players has put their location on social media. And that just means that we can then educate them and we can put a separate workshop on and explain to them for security reasons, they're at risk by putting where they are, because then obviously if we have more higher profile players now, like a Frank Kirby or an Akita Paris, there's obviously a lot of people that want to try and meet them and idolise them a lot. And obviously there's also some people that we wouldn't be really feel safe them meeting out in a public domain, so we encourage them not to put the location on. We monitor exactly what sort of comments are getting put on there. So if we've had a bad game and one of them has individually had a bad game, we can monitor the comments, and then the company that we use, that sort of, they'll flag to us if there's anything on there that they think, right, you need to check in with the player. And it's just, again, things like of the certain anniversaries of any of the players have got sort of maybe somebody in their family that's passed away, and then they put on a story which says sort of recognising the death. It means that then our safeguarding and welfare team can check in on them to check they're okay. We also recruit players globally. So we've got a lot of players that are living a long way away from home. Some of them can be as young as 17, 18, and we're moving them from Australia over to the UK. So we do things as well if they're putting on there on the social media accounts where they're missing home. We use that to our benefit so that we can make sure we support them, as well as using it for the other side of helping them grow their brand as well, and making sure that, I think we spoke earlier about how actually a lot of fans in the women's game, actually they follow individuals, not necessarily teams, and that's how you grow your fan base, because they start off coming to watch your games because they're a Frank Kirby fan, so we get more and more fans coming to watch Frank Kirby. Eventually we hope that they like the product on the pitch, and then they become Brighton and Hove Albion fans for many years to come, and then their children become Brighton and Hove Albion fans, and that's how, historically, that's how fans have happened in the men's game, and where hopefully the same can happen in the women's game. But I think we use that, and I think we've got to make sure that we put our players on the stage, and we make sure we do everything we can we've got a designated marketing and media team at Brighton, and we've got to make sure that we utilise them to get the messaging out, to make sure that our players have a platform, and we help grow their individual brand, because that helps them in their careers, but also it helps us as well.
That's an incredible amount of care there. Do you know if that's the case across the WSL landscape, or are Brighton quite at the forefront?
I think it's a lot of clubs now. I think probably a lot of the more higher profile clubs have to do that, because the safety of the players has been at the forefront of everyone's minds. It's been critical to the business, I think, moving forwards now, with the more attention it's getting off the back of a lot of the success of the major tournaments. I think we've seen the abuse that they get online, and the security thing reasons has been really gone up recently. Yeah,
and do clubs sort of information share on stuff like this? I'm just thinking in a country which is trying to grow the game, the professional clubs here could do a lot by talking to professional clubs from the UK.
Yeah, I think that's something in the UK we do quite a lot with I'll speak with a lot of my counterparts at WSL clubs, I'll speak with a lot of my counterparts at Women's Championship clubs, and we'll just share best practice. And it's the same for whether that be our psychologists. The psychologists all meet with each other and have regular calls, and whether that be the nutritionist. There's a lot of working groups now, but that's only been something that's been put in place over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. I think the more the game grows, the more these things become common practice, and the more clubs are willing to share, because I think everyone should be in it for the same reason, and that's for the passion of wanting to grow the women's game for the right reasons. So hopefully everybody does want to share good practice, which will all help us sort of develop on the journey together as well. I don't think sharing of good practice like that around social media is causing any sort of like competitive advantage on the pitch. It's more about the safety of the players.
Yeah, everyone's a guardian of the game, right, and is there for the players. I wanted to move on to social content. Morgan, as a player and a content creator, and INDIVISA as we use both on and off pitch content. Mm-hmm. Now, I think I know what you're going to say, but can you? Which is a better way to engage fans? Because there's so many. I see so many highlights reels of football on my feed that I sometimes don't know what I'm watching. Right, so it's very hard to get any brand equity, let alone league equity sometimes, unless I look at it. So, just tell me a bit about the importance of different types of content in engaging and growing the sport. Yeah,
for sure. So one of the things that we really acknowledged when building INDIVISA and our content strategy was how nuanced the fans are on the women's side and all the different levels that they are coming into the game at. Maybe they have only started watching it in the last 6 months, or maybe they've been a fan for the last 20 years. Like, we really wanted to make sure that we were serving all of them with our content, and it all being very kind of inclusive and accessible, and making sure that we had entry-level content that wouldn't exclude a certain type of fan. So for that reason, we do a lot of off-pitch content. So that varies from, memes about the WSL players, or, content that we've shared from Twitter that we've found, like niche communities that have these incredible kind of references and in-jokes, to sharing a lot of lifestyle and kit-focused content. There's a lot of value in sort of styling content, and the way that has really brought in a whole new wave of fans who are kind of really interested in the game from a lifestyle perspective. And I think there's a huge value in that here in Italy especially. And then, we're also sharing content that is around playing itself. So instead of, covering sort of elite on-pitch coverage of the game, we're talking about training, grassroots teams, tactics, how to find a team, how to join a team. So yeah, we see a lot of value in that, and almost more so than the on-the-pitch coverage.
Yeah, and similar question for you, Badrea, really. How do you see the engagement with the different types of content you create and you ask your players to create?
Well, considering there was no content for women's football before, I think people are happy to see anything to do with women's. Now, one thing that maybe was a little bit challenging, and something I didn't see coming at all, was the lack of engagement from the male fan base that we have because of cultural restrictions. So I know male footballers and actual fans of Banaat FC who just will not follow Banaat FC because you don't do that as a guy. You will not follow a girls' team. You will not engage with a girls' team. They will message me or share a post with me and tell me, "Oh, this is great." I'm like, "Why aren't you liking it? Why aren't you commenting?" Like, "No, my community can't see me engaging with a girls' club." So that's a completely different challenge, and something we're working on with every single player, almost as one-on-one, and explaining to them the importance of their support and what it does. And we've gotten incredible male allies through that kind of work and educating them on the importance of their engagement with our accounts. But in general, any content we share, and we have TikTok as a sponsor from last season, and anything we put on TikTok where the players just show their personality is incredible. In the Arab world, I think, like most of the world, men are just, maybe around the world, we're not as supportive of women's football, but we get attacked very heavily. And anytime any bit of news is shared about the women's game, by almost any media publication, we are used as clickbait, not for actual support of the women's game, which is a shame, but at the same time, it's awareness, so we'll take it. And it's how you deal with it, and just making sure that the players know that none of that hate that we're getting online has anything to do with them. But we're getting engagement, and showing personality has done a lot for us, and has gotten a lot of people to sign up to our website and want to be part of Banaat FC because of the chemistry and the positive energy that they see between the girls for these moments that we capture between training or before a game or after a game, because it's not something that's typically seen out there. INDIVISA in the region has done an amazing job with the Saudi Women's League. And I think they've set the benchmark now for what we want to do for women's football. So now when I want to do something for my club and think what kind of content will be appropriate, but will still look professional. We won't look too silly. We won't look like we're just girls out there having fun. These are actual, as professional as they can be, football players. We look at INDIVISA and see what they've done in Saudi and think, okay, they've accepted it, they can take it here.
Cool. And Zoe, you've talked before, and we discussed beforehand about the importance of letting people know what you're doing as a club. It's too easy for teams to exist in a void on social and maybe not really think they have to be talking about it. Can you tell us how you've done that and the success that has had and how that's brought new people in?
Yeah, I think we're probably quite fortunate in terms of at Brighton, where we've got our designated team that look after that, and we make like any sort of marketing or media. We have our own designated women's channels, but we also make sure we work collaboratively with our men's channels as well. Obviously, they've got a lot more followers than what we have, so we make sure we do a lot in terms of whether that be some interaction between our men's team head coach and our women's team head coach. We make sure that we collab the accounts, and we make sure that we try and do everything that gives them as much exposure as possible to try and make sure that we get more either reactions or likes on social media, but more importantly, so we can try and attract them to come down to games more. We make sure that we give our players the platform to do, whether that be club podcasts, whether that be to go and do interviews. We'll always give them the license and support to go and do any interviews, whether that be for Sky, local papers, BBC, things like that. We'll always make sure that we have a player care team and a media team that will support those visits and make sure that we're always constantly on the pushing and guiding them into doing these. The more exposure they get in the media, it is better for our brand as a football club, but it's better for them as well. So yeah, we'll always try and showcase what we're doing, whether that's be the media team. At the moment, we're doing quite well in the league. We're sat third in the WSL, which is a bit of a rarity for us in terms of this season's been a bit of a new lease of life for us. So the media team are happy because they've got far more content to keep pushing out every week, and there's a bit of a general perception in the women's game that the fans all celebrate, the players all celebrate together when they score a goal. So we've been doing a lot of education with our players. If you score, can you go off and celebrate to the crowd? Can you do something a little bit more unique, which gives the media team something to capture, which means then we can push the message out during the week and the next lead up to the next fixture.
And who's got the best celebration? Then have they been practicing?
I think it's got to be Nikita Paris because she scored. We drew 1-1 with Man United, which was her old club, and when she scored, she went and celebrated in front of the Man United bench.
As you should. As you should. We've got 5 minutes left, and we could keep on talking all day, but I wanted to know if anyone in the crowd had any questions for the panel. Anyone? I can't see. No questions? Okay. On that note then, because that presents its own challenge, if there's still a long way to go for women's football in Italy and women's football across the world, could you each tell me, and Badrea, I'll start with you, the biggest hurdle you face and you face in your region to growth? Or what needs to change?
I feel like I have to give a politically correct answer here because I want to stay in the game.
Yeah, fair enough.
But we need more support. We need more support. I know everyone in the men's game, in the UAE, Saudi, Egypt, a bit of Qatar. And most of the support I get is from international organizations or others that see the value in what I'm building, but I'm not getting enough locally, I'm saying. So facilities it's huge for us. It's bank breaking if you don't get what you need for the games, for training. I think if I start with basics, I'll just say that I'm going to start with facilities.
Okay, and Zoe?
Yeah, I think I'm in a fortunate position where I have a football club that passionately believes in women's football and the growth that it's on, but I would probably say one of the biggest challenges for me right now working at a WSL club is the trajectory that the game's on, and it's in the UK, the game's growing at a tremendous pace, and the revenue probably isn't matching where the growth is when it comes to player salaries. So I think for me personally in my role, one of the biggest challenges is player recruitment. If we want to attract world-class talent to the club, that costs. The transfer fees are increasing, the player salaries are increasing, but the revenues aren't matching that. So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I have at the moment.
And Morgan, from a content perspective?
God, I wasn't thinking about it from a content perspective.
Well, from whatever perspective you want to give.
I mean, I was just thinking more, I guess, in terms of the growth here in Italy. Like, any sort of complacency or hesitancy to wait for that opportunity. Like, you know, even in the UK, we still hear a lot of, but the fan base isn't there yet, but the audience isn't there yet, and that's not going to grow until you build it, until you show them that it's there. And I think that hesitancy is quite dangerous, because you'll get left behind, essentially, because the women's game is just continuously growing at a rapid rate. So, yeah.
Yeah, the return on investment might take a lot longer to come than people want, but it's never going to come if you don't invest, I think is the best way to put it. Round of applause for the panel, please. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.